Welcome back to statistics. Statistics is the science of data, and in any data, we have to be on the lookout for outliers. Outliers are data values that are not in the general pattern of the overall data set. So, what do outliers look like for regression? We want to take a look at that idea today and also address a related topic, the idea of an influential point in a regression, which may not be an outlier but has some of the same kinds of effects. So let's take a look. Outliers and influential points in regression. So the idea of an outlier is that it's a data value that doesn't follow the pattern. In a regression, the pattern is essentially defined by the trend line, right? And so an outlier in a regression is a data point that doesn't get in line, right? Uh, that would be an example of an outlier. Another way to think about an outlier, and it's actually the same way, is just that it's a point with a large residual. So you can see that our outlier in this example would have a very large residual compared to the other data points. Notice that outliers often reduce the correlation. You can see the correlation in the upper left-hand corner here. Without the outlier, we were looking at pretty weak association, but a correlation of 0.2371. And with the outlier, it's now gone down to 0.0983. So outliers often have that effect of reducing the correlation in a data set. Influential points are another kind of sort of exceptional point in a regression. And in some ways, they're like outliers, and in some ways, they're not. One way they're not like outliers is often influential points actually increase the correlation, sort of artificially. So here's an example of an influential point. Notice that this influential point increase the correlation from the 0.2371 all the way up to 0.8014. Why? That's one reason it's called influential. It has a big influence, just that single data point has a big influence on the correlation of the regression. What makes it an influential point? It's not an outlier. Notice that the residual of that point is almost zero. So it won't be an outlier, at least as far as the regression is concerned. It fits in the pattern of the line. But it is an outlier in the x direction, right? If you think about the x value of that influential point, it is very different than the other four x values you see. And so influential points are often outliers in the x direction for a regression. And as we said, they often increase the correlation. In fact, you can kind of see it in these shots where I'm just moving that influential point around, that the correlation remains very high. That's an artificial inflation of the correlation we're seeing there because the majority of the data still would have a very low correlation if it weren't for that influential point. And the basic reason that the correlation gets inflated like that is the fact that it's an outlier in the x direction. It turns out that the correlation coefficient is not robust against outliers. And so that's what's sort of causing these effects. So outliers and influential points are both kind of exceptional points for a regression, and they need to be handled carefully. They can degrade the quality of the regression by either making it appear artificially weak or artificially strong. And in practice, it's best to rerun a regression both with and without outliers and influential points in order to really precisely determine the effect of each one on the regression. And this just points to the idea that creating a good regression model is much more than just sort of uploading your data into a computer somewhere and hitting the run button. It involves a very careful attention paid to the details of your data set. And outliers and influential points are important kind of points to be on the lookout for when you're doing a regression. So uh, there is one idea of uh, outliers and influential points for regressions. Let me know if you have questions, and we will talk at you again real soon.